Hello YouTube! Today we are going to talk about field arrays in Formik. You are probably familiar with fields that are a string and fields that are a number. But let's say you want to have an array of telephone numbers or an array of addresses. For those two examples, you are going to use a field array. Before we jump into the demo I have prepared for today, let's just look into a real-world application. This on my right, your left, is my pension in the UK, and usually those pensions they require you to put some beneficiaries in case I pass away or something bad happens to me. Those two people are going to receive my pension. As you can see, that thing also has validations. If we sum the percentages and the percentages are above 100%, then it triggers an error. Now, let's jump into a more positive note over here on my screen, and let's build a donations platform, which is something more positive than my pension, right? So, over here, I have my name, which is a normal string field. Then I have a field that will be a number, and this is the donation amount, let's say £5,000, and then this is when or where our field array starts. So I will say institution 1, I will say 50% to this institution, and immediately you can see that our validation is triggering, saying percentage should be 100%, but you have only 50%. So let's add another donation, say institution 2, we can say that this other institution will be also 50%, and now that validation is gone. If you are not sure about one of the institutions, you can come over here, delete that institution, add another institution, saying institution 3, give it 50% once again, and now our form is valid. You can accept the terms and conditions and submit the form. If you want to scroll a bit more, you can see that I left this debug over here in the deploy I did to Vercel. So you can see exactly the values that are inside our field array of donations. All the links for this deployment and for my GitHub repository are in the video description. I think I already spoke a bit too much, so let's now jump into VS Code to start building this application. When you clone my repository, you will get this very simple form using Formik. The only thing really we are doing over here is just printing the values and the errors. So when you go to the browser, this is what you are going to get. Now, if you already watched any of my videos about Formik, you probably want to skip the initial configuration I will do for all the fields and jump directly to the point where I will be touching the field arrays. I will leave a link into the description with all the timestamps of the video, so you can move forward if you want to. Now, for the ones that want to watch me build the application up to the moment we need field arrays, you are very welcome to come with me. So, I will start by having a grid with a container, and then inside this grid container, we will have a grid item, right? So every single field we will have will be a grid item, and the grid container will be just the outsider. This is just using flexboxes in terms of Material UI. So I will just import this from Material UI core, and now I have my grid container and my grid item. In the future, what we will end up with will be something like this, where all the fields will be inside these grid items. Just a small provision of the future, right? So over here we will have field name, and the first field will be our full name. And because we are using full name over here, we need to pass it to our initial values. So I will do full name, an empty string for now. I can already start to put all the other fields we will have. The second one will be the donations amount, which we will start at 0. And the last one will be our terms and conditions checkbox, which we want it to start as false. Now, we will import this field from Formik itself, right? Over there. And now we have our first field. If we go to our browser and we start to type, for example, Bruno, you will see that Bruno is over there. Now, if you want to remove these autocompletes, which I usually don't like that much, you can just come over here into the form and do the following: autocomplete equals to off, right? And if you go back and you start, oops, I need to refresh, sorry. And if you start to type, I don't have any autocompletes anymore. If you want to have the autocomplete, well, just remove that autocomplete equals to off. Now, as I said, we can just start to copy those fields, and we will have three fields. The first one is the full name, the second one will be the donations amount, and it will be of type number, right? So if I go back, you will have now three fields where I have Bruno. Oops, I forgot to change the last one. We will change the last one. But as you can see, we have the full name, we have the donations amount, which we can say 123, and now if you want to convert this into material UI text fields to have those animations and everything, it's actually very easy using Formik. We just need to say component equals to text field. Now, we just need to be careful when we import this text field. We don't want to import this text field from Material UI core. In reality, we want to import this one from this library called Formik-material-UI. Okay? When we do that, I can do the same thing for our other field. Now, our text fields also accept a label. So in our case, we can say this label will be full name, and this label will be, for example, donations or donation only. It's a good label, right? And I can say in pounds so people know the currency. I will just format this code because it was starting to get a bit ugly. So now it looks a bit nicer. And I already have the label for our donation, and we have the label for our full name, and I will touch the checkbox in a second. So those two already are the normal Material UI text fields that you know. So they are already working correctly. So we will touch now the checkbox. And the checkbox, I think we called it terms and conditions just to avoid typos. I will copy paste. It's much safer. I will say that the type of this one will be a checkbox, and the component will be a checkbox with label. And once again, if you come at the top of the file, we will import from checkbox with label, right? So from Formik Material UI, not from Material UI itself. Okay. Now this one supports a slightly different label than the other two. The other two were just label, and we typed it like that. The checkbox with label is slightly different. So we will have label, and then we pass an object to it, and inside then yes, we pass the label. So the label, we can say something like I accept the terms and conditions, for example, is a good label, right? So I format this code, and now if I go back over here, we have the checkboxes that we know and love from Material UI. So this bit is starting to look exactly as we want it to be. Now, we want to also add a submit button, right? So let me just copy this bit. In reality, I just need to copy the grid item, and over here I will do button, and my button, I want it to be called, for example, submit. I will just change slightly how it looks. So I will say variant equals to contained, and I want the color to be primary. Let me just import the button. This one now, yes, it will be from Material UI /core. And I will just do type equals to submit, right? If we go back to our browser, we now have this submit button. So we can click there and it will submit our form. Now, when I'm submitting, usually I like to have some kind of spinner or something like that on my buttons. So I will just fake very fast an HTTP call to our server. So we will just do the following. Transform this function into an async function. I will just do console log my values and print the values. So if you open the developer tools, you can see the values we submitted. And over here, I will just do return new promise resolve. And over here, I will just do set timeout. How many seconds do you want? 2-3 seconds? Let's go 2.5 seconds. Split it in half. So we will have 2.5 seconds. So clicking over here, refreshing our browser, I can now click and nothing happened. So what I did, let me just open this over here. Okay, I'm getting this. So we didn't do anything for our button in order for it to react to those 2.5 seconds. So in Formik, we can come over here where we have the values and the errors, where we are grabbing it from Formik itself, and there is a property called isSubmitting, right? And this property called isSubmitting, we can use it at the bottom over here in our button. The first thing you probably want to do is to disable that button while you are doing that HTTP call to your server. So I will do disabled equals to isSubmitting. Let me format this code. And now the second thing you probably want to do is, instead of saying submit, when you click, you probably want to change that text to submitting or something on those lines, right? So I will just say isSubmitting. If it is true, then my text is submitting. And probably I have typos on submitting. No, I think it's well typed. And if it's false, we have submit. So let me come over here. I will just refresh. And now when I click, it's submitting and the button is disabled. If you want to put a spinner in the Material UI button, is actually quite easy. So you have this start icon. You also have an end icon if you want to put the spinner at the end, right? And we will do something very similar to what we did over here for the text. So we will do isSubmitting. If it's true, then we will use the circular progress from Material UI. If not, we don't do anything. We don't put any icon over there, right? So if I come over here, let me just close this and I refresh, I click over here and this spinner is actually quite big. So let's just change the size of that spinner to be 1 rem, probably is a bit too big, 0.9, I think it will be, 1 probably was good. Let's just try. Refresh, click submit, and it's a good spinner. It could be a slightly bit smaller, but good enough for what we want. The button doesn't change the size, so it's good enough. Now, we want to make these fields look a bit nicer. They look a bit too compact at the moment. So what we need to do, and that's the reason I was putting everything inside this grid container. So we can now come over here and say the following. Our grid container will now change the direction to be a column instead of being a row like we have at the moment. So the direction will be a column right now. And if I do that alone, and I start to say that all my fields will be full width, so this one will also be full width, now it will probably look slightly nicer, right? Yeah, it looks much better. The only thing I think I need is some spacing between those full name and the donation, because it's just too close to each other. And I would say around 2 spacing will be good enough. So let's come over here and say spacing equals to 2. If you didn't watch my video about styling in Material UI, that I will leave a link somewhere in the video, each of those units, if you put 1, it means around 8 pixels. If you put 2, it will be around 16 pixels for 2 units, right? So at the moment we are using 2 units, which means roughly 16 pixels of spacing. So now everything looks much, much nicer. So before we go to the field array, I think it's time for us to do already the validations. So when the other viewers join us, we are only really talking about the field array, and we do everything for the field array, including the validations. So we don't need to touch the validations for these 3 fields we already did, right? So how do we do validations with Formik and Material UI and UP? Well, it's actually very easy. We can just come over here and do validationSchema will be an object, and inside this object, oops, it needs to be lowercase o, right? And inside that, I will just do object. I already know that I will need a number, I will need a string, and I will need a boolean from UP, right? And so over here, what we need to do is just copy what we have over there. So we have the exact same fields without any typos. And now for the full name, we know it will be a string. So we let UP know that it will be a string. Then we can say that is a required field, right? Because we need the full name of the person. Then you can say that the minimum number of characters it's probably 1, but 1 is the same as required. So just for the sake of the video, I will put 2 characters. I think some names in some languages can be only 1 character, so don't use this validation, all right? And then the maximum, I will say 10 characters just for the validations in this video, right? My name alone is bigger than 10 characters. So this is just for the validation of the video. Now, for the donations amount, we will have something very similar. We will say it's a number, it's also required, and we will say the minimum amount of donations is, for example, 10 pounds, right? And we don't have a maximum for the donations. Then, for the terms and conditions, we know it will be a Boolean. It's required, so we need to have that Boolean, and for us, it needs to be always true. Luckily, Yoop already has that validation, so it will be always true. If it is false, we don't want to submit our form. Now, if we come over here, let me just refresh this form. I will do a submit, and after I do the submit, you can see all the errors we have. We have full name. Full name is a required field. The donations amount must be greater or equal than 10, and the terms and conditions field must be true. So if you don't like these errors as they are presented, you can just come over here and, for example, in the required, you can say you need to provide a name. Then over here in these two, you need to say your full name needs to be at least 2 characters, right? And for the maximum, you can do exactly the same thing. Your name cannot be bigger or larger than 10 characters, right? And then you can put any message you actually want over there, right? So as you can see, you can edit the messages. I will not do any edit for those two, but if you want, you see that you can edit any message you want. Now let me come over here, just do a refresh, and you can see that when I do my B, you can see your full name needs to be at least 2 characters, which is our message. You need to provide a name, which is also our message. If it is bigger than 10, your name cannot be bigger than 10 characters, right? So all of those are our messages. The only thing we need to do right now is over here in my accept the terms and conditions, I want this to be red when it's invalid, right? I think it makes sense to use this red. So let's just come over here, and in Material UI, we can just use the styles this way. Use styles equals to make styles, right? And this is just using JSS behind the scenes. In the future, in version 5 of Material UI, they will start to use emotion. So if you are watching this video probably in 6 months, this line 14 will no longer be valid for you, right? Just keep that in mind. So we will use the theme, and now over here, what we are going to do is just return an object, right? And inside this object, we will have the class name that we want. In my case, I will say error color, for example. And now over here inside, we have any CSS property that you already know. The one I want is color, and I will use the theme from Material UI, and I will go to the palette, and inside the palette, I have something called error, which is the error color palette, and there is a few colors for the error. The one I want is the main color for the error, right? So if I format this code, it looks slightly better now. So what we need to do is just coming over here to our component and do classes equals to use styles. So this slight bit over here will be deprecated in a few months, let's say 6 months, 8 months from now. So just check the Material UI documentation at the time to make sure that they are already in version 5 or not. Okay, so I will just need to grab these classes, and now over here in my checkbox, where is our checkbox, I just need to go to the label, and one of the properties we are going to pass will be class name, and the class name will be dependent on the fact that we have errors on this field or not. So if we have errors dot terms and conditions, then I will pass the class error color. Otherwise, I will just do undefined, right? So if I format this and I go back over there, I can now refresh and I can click again, and now it's red because I have a terms and condition field must be true. At the same time, if I refresh and I click on submit, they all become red, and I think they are exactly the same shade of red. Now I think we have everything we need to welcome back the new users or the old viewers from the video that jumped all the section about the other fields. So we already have all of these fields. So let's welcome the other viewers, and we will start to now play with arrays in Formik. So what are those arrays in Formik? The first thing I will gonna do over here is just to create a new array called donations, right? And even before we use any field array, I will show you what you can do just for you to understand how this works inside Formik directly. So over here, I will just do the following. I will use a field and I will do donations of 0. And that's it for now, right? And I will do another donations 1 and the donations 2, right? So as you can see, I'm not doing anything special yet, but if you come over here and I refresh, I can now start to do 1, 2, 3, for example, Bruno, and my last name, Antunes. And if you see the values, now we have already the 3 values over there. I already have a donations 1, 2, 3, which is the first field. I have Bruno, which is the second one, and I have the last one, which is my last name. Now, we had over there just an array of strings. If you want an array of objects, like what we are going to have, we will have the institution and the percentage. So you can just do the following. You can just come over here and do institution, for example, copy paste this one. We can put percentage. And if I just copy paste this and change it to 1, you will see that now we will have 2 objects over here, right? So let's just refresh, and you will have now 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you see over here, we have institution 1, percentage 2, institution 3, percentage 4. So why I'm showing you this? Because a lot of people think that what's happening in the future when I start to use the field array is that the field array is controlling that array and what's displayed in that array. But in reality, what's controlling the array or the values that are in those arrays is this name over here, right? If you prefer, instead of having this array notation, you can just have donations.0.institutions. These 2 notations are exactly the same, and Formik understands both. I can prove you that coming over here, refreshing, and now if I type hello and bye-bye, as you can see, I have hello, bye-bye. I can type xxx, yyy, and as you can see, everything just works as 1 minute ago, right? So now it's the time for us to start and to introduce the field array. And the responsibility of the field array will be to add and remove items from the donations value, right? This array that we passed over there. So what we can do is start our donations array with already 1 object. And we will have institution, and we will start with an empty institution and a percentage, which will be 0 by default as well, right? So let me just delete all of these. Let me just put a field array, and one of the properties of the field array is that it will receive the name, and the name will be donations. And in order to pass donations over here, the initial value of donations needs to be an array. Okay, it doesn't matter if you have already values inside the array or if it is an empty array, right? But it needs to be an array. Now, what we need to do over here is, like we did with the Formik component, we will just have a function over here, and we will start to destruct the properties that we have from this field array. Let me just import the field array so we can have autocomplete of our properties. So when I type over here, you can see we have a lot of options over here. you have insert, if you want to insert in a specific position of the array. You also have push, which is what we are going to use. This push works exactly the same way as the push in normal arrays. So you push and you put it at the end of the array. And we will also use the remove in order to delete items by the index from the array. And as you can see, you have a lot more options over here. You can move certain objects or just values on that array. You have a lot of options over there that you can just access by control space in VS Code. Now, we are over here and we can start to just draw what we want to see in terms of the arrays. So the first thing I will do is just put a React fragment, because I don't need a div for this. And the first thing I'm going to do is to have a grid, and inside this grid, I will just have an item, right? And now what I'm going to do with this item over here is just to say the title that we want for these donations. So all your donations, for example, something on those lines, right? We can even use the typography from Material UI if you want to. We can use the typography, right? And on the typography, I can just come over here and just say all your donations. And now you have possibilities to come over here and use any of the variants that you want to use, right? If you want it to have a lot of emphasis over here, you can use, for example, an H2. And so this will be the same size of an H2. If you go to the browser and you go up, you will see that all your donations. This is just way too big for me, so I will just use a body 2, right? A body 2, for example, is just a good sizing. Now, this is the time that I will start to loop through the values that I have inside the donations array. So I will do the following. I will go to the values dot donations, and this is our array of donations. So I will do just the following. Map, the first position actually is the value of that donation, the object. I don't care about it for now. What I care is the index, which is the second parameter. Now, what I will do is the following. For each of those, I will have another grid item, right? Like we did before, just to style it in a nicer way. And now the only thing I really want to do is to put a field with my institution and then another field with my percentage. So let me just do that over here. I will call it a container. So I will have a row, right? And then inside that, I will have a grid item with the first field, which will be name donations of index, right? So I will need to pass it like this. Like, oops. It's hard. So I will have donations like this, and now I will do the following. Index, right? Dot institution. So this is my first field, and my second field, I can just copy this little bit, come over here, and instead of being institution, I will do percentage. And as you can see, when it's 0, this is exactly what we had before. As I said, if you prefer, you can have the dots index. So I can even leave one with the dot notation and another one with the array notation. So you can see both and see both working, right? Now that we are over here, we can just go back over here. And if I refresh, you will see that the first one, institution, can be, for example, Red Cross. And let's say we want to allocate 100% to the Red Cross. So now I have those two values over there already in my array, and it's already an object. Now, I can just come over here and do what we did 10 minutes ago for the other fields. I will just do the following. Component will be a text field, and the label will be called institution, all right? And I will do the exact same thing for the percentage, but this case I will call it percentage, and I will say that this is a type of number, So I will save this, format the code, and when we come over here, it will look slightly better, right? So now one thing that we can do is to add a button to delete this specific item from the array, and then we need a button to add items to the array. So I will use the remove right now over here. So I will do grid item, and I will just use a button. And this button, I will just call it for now delete. Then we can use an icon, right, from Material UI to look a little bit nicer. And so what we are going to do is the following. Click, and what we will do is this. Remove, and we will just say the index, right? So when we click in this button, we will just remove this specific object from the array. Let's just test to see if it works, even though it's looking ugly for now. But when I click, my array of donations went away. Now we need another one in order to have a button to add donations. So let me do this. A grid item, and I will have a button, and that button will be on click. And I will just do the following. Push, and over here I will say institution, which is an empty string, and the percentage will be 0. I can save that bit, right? Over there, let me just see what it is complaining about. I didn't close my button, which is absolutely correctly, and we can call it add donation. Okay, so I can come over here, I can refresh, and now I have a button to add donations. And as you can see, I can add donations, I can delete donations. So let's just give it a try before we start to make it look a little bit nicer, and then to start to do the validation on those fields. So the first institution is, for example, the Red Cross. I will give 50% of my money to them. The other institution is, for example, the police, and I will give another 50% to them, for example. So if we see over here, everything is working as we expect. Now, we just need to do a few things on these grid items. The first one is, if we are in a very small device, I want this to be 12, so it will be full screen in a very small device. And in order to accomplish that, I need to do what we did before to the other fields, which is to tell them that they are full width. I can do also for this one to be full width. And when we grow a bit more than a very small device, I will put auto, right? Let's do auto, and I will show you what it does in a few seconds. So let me just refresh, go back over here. And so what's happening over here, if I refresh and I go to a very small device, is that my institution is 100% of the screen, my percentage is also 100% of the screen, and my delete button, well, is just on the left side of the screen. We can make it 100% if we want to, but I don't think that's needed, right? So now we have some errors over here on the console, and they make sense. We need to pass a key to our fragment. So we can come over here, and we will do the following. Key equals to index, for example, right? So now we have everything that we need. We can just refresh, and now we have no more errors. I can click on add donation. I will just change this add donation button as well, because it's looking very ugly. So I will just do the variant to be contained. And now it looks slightly better, at least in my opinion, right? If you don't want to be copy pasting this bit all the time, we can just come at the top and call it const empty donation equals to this. So I can just come over here and remove this by an empty donation. And at the bottom where we are doing the push, I will do also an empty donation, which looks slightly better in terms of our code. And if you have a lot of properties, it's much, much better this way, right? So you avoid creating all of those properties all the time. It's just annoying, right? Now that we have all of these, as I said, we just need to make these two be a bit bigger on the screen. And if you watch the beginning of this video, I told you that those grids are just a flex box. So if they are a flex box, I will just call this new class stretch, right? And I will say flex grow will be 1. So we can just go to the bottom over here, and where we have these grids, we just need to say class name equals to classes dot stretch. I can copy this bit, I paste over here. Now if I come over here, I can refresh and it looks much nicer. I just need to add now a spacing over in my container, and we will use the same spacing we used before, which is a 2. And now this will look much nicer, right? I can add donations to institutions. Let's say another institution, Red Cross again. I don't know many institutions, I'm sorry. So you can see that we have a lot of donations over there, and everything is working as you may expect. Now, one thing that you probably want to do is to do validations, because if I say I'm going to pass $500 in donations, or pounds in this case, in donations, and then in the percentage, I'm just passing, I don't know, 20 and then 30, right? It means that the total is only 50. I want to allocate 100% of those donations, because otherwise what happens? Does the government keeps the other 250? What just happens, right? So we need a validation to make sure that this validation will be first between 1 and 100, right? That's the first validation we want to make sure is each of those fields individually is between 1 and 100. And then we want another validation that does whatever we have here. Let's say we have 50 over here. It does 50 plus 30. It's 80. 80 is different from 100. So we are very sorry, but we have an error, right? So let's just come over here into our VS Code once again, and we will just go into the validation schema, and we will add these donations. And so one of the properties that we have in UP will be the array. So let me just come to UP over here and say array, right? And now that we have the array, we can do a few things with this array. The first thing we can do with this array is to tell that we want, for example, to have at least one donation. So we can say the minimum is at least one donation. And let's say for whatever reason, legally speaking in the government, you can't ever give more than 3 donations at the same time. So let's say we have 3 donations as the maximum, right? So this is literally counting the number of items we have in the array. Now, if you want to have validation per field, right, we can do the following. Object, which is telling that each position inside the array will be an object, right? If they were strings, you will say string over here instead of object. And so for the first property of our array, we will have institution. So we will do institution, we will have string required, and let's say that an institution, the minimum is, for example, 3 characters, and for whatever legal reason, the maximum is 10. This is most probably completely wrong. There are companies shorter than 3 characters and larger than 10 characters, but for the sake of the video, let's keep it as is. And then we will do the percentage. So the percentage, we will have a number, which will be required. And the minimum for that number is 1%. And the maximum for each number is 100%. Now, you will see that the error messages will be very ugly, right? If I do 0, for example, you will see that the donation messages, they are very ugly. I don't like those messages, especially because they say donation 0 percentage must be greater or equal than 1. So as I showed you before, I will do just for the percentage for the institution is exactly the same. Percentage is needed. Then we can say percentage needs to be at least 1. Percentage cannot be bigger than 100, right? Let's format the code, and you can do the exact same thing for the institution if you want to. Now, if I refresh, you will see that when I do percentage, if I just say percentage of 0, which is a good example, it will say percentage need to be at least 1. If we say 101, it says percentage cannot be bigger than 100. If I don't put anything, it says that percentage is needed, right? So before I commit, I will then change the institution, but you probably don't want to see me typing all of this for the institution once again, right? Now, the validation that you probably really want to see, which is summing everything into that array for the percentage and then sending an error. So how to do that? Well, luckily Formik and Yup, in this case, not Formik, sorry, Yup has a property or a function called test. So we will use that function, and basically if this function returns true, it's because it's valid. If it returns false, it's because it's invalid. So over here, what this function does is that it gives us the array of donations, right? So our array of donations will be just donations, for example, which is our value that we care about. And then we know it's an array. And actually, the only property we care is the percentage. We really don't care about our institution field. If you really care about the institution for whatever reason, you can have institution as a string. In my case, I really don't care, right? So I can delete institution from there. Now, how can we do this? Let's just return by default true, for example, and let's just say the following. Let's just do a console log of donations. So you can see the donations, and I will just do AAA. So you can see the donations and what we are working with. So let me just come over here, refresh, open the developer tools. And if I do add submit, you will see that that validation run. And over here, I received an array with one option. If I add another donation and I click submit again, you can see that now the array has two values. The first one is the first value in that array, and the second one is the second value in that array. So the only thing that now we need to do, imagine that we have an array with 1, 2, 3, and we want to sum everything. The easiest way is to use the reduce, and we will use the accumulated, the current, and then the only thing we need to do is to do accumulated plus current, and this will give us, oops, I did one too much, and this will give us 6. So we can do exactly the same thing over here. So I can even copy this. The only difference is that our current will be current.percentage to grab the percentage, because in reality, we have an object over there. So let me just come to VS Code, and the only thing we need to do is to do this. Const sum equals to donations dot reduce. And now what we need to do is to just do cur.percentage, and we will just start this as 0, right? Because you can start the accumulated value at any value you want. For us, we want to start it at 0 just to make sure that it starts at 0. Then what you can do is just do the following. Return sum equals to 100. Right? So if it is 100, everything's fine. If it's different from 100, actually we have an error. So let me just go over here, close this because we don't need this anymore. I will just refresh. We will say that we have, for example, percentage as 99. So over here in the errors, we should have now an error saying institution is a required field. And why is this happening? Because Yup first validates each object individually. Only when all of those objects individually they are validated, then yes, it goes to our full test function, which is the function we are doing that reduce. So now I will come over here, say for example the institution is called Bruno for whatever reason. We try to submit, and you will see that donations is invalid, and these donations is invalid. So we can even show a message somewhere over there, something we are not doing. So I can even come over here and just print a message saying that I'm really sorry, we are invalid. So where are our validations? We have the add donation button, so we should put that before our add donation button, right? So we will do the following. Type of errors.donation is a string, right? So if it is a string, then we want to say our message, otherwise we don't want to do anything. So our message in this case will be typography, and we will just say errors.donations, right? And now that we have our errors.donation, we can say color equals to error, I guess. That's it, exactly. If you are now asking why I did this validation, saying errors.donation is a string, well, it's a good question. So let me just refresh this page. I will just go and do a submit, and now you will see the errors that we have in donations. So the errors we have in donation for now is an array. So I actually don't care when it's an internal error. When it's an external error, it will be a string. And that's the only type of error that I care about, is when it's a string. That's the only reason I have this type of errors.donations equals to a string. Now, if I come over here and I just do, for example, a percentage of 99, and I do institution to be, for example, Bruno, I will have donations is invalid. If I add another donation and do, for example, I don't know, Antunes, which is my last name, and I do 11, donation is invalid. But if I do just 1, 99 plus 1 is valid. If I scroll, you will see that we don't have any error for the validation. Now, you can just return over here an object, which is, instead of just saying that very bland message, right? You can just come over here and do the following. If sum is different than 100, right? You can just return a new validation error, right? Which is this one, validation error. And in that validation error, you can type the message that you want, okay? And why is that important? Because in this case, I want to say something on the lines of, your percentage at the moment is 99, for example. We require it to be 100. So people immediately understand where is the point they are and what we require. So in the validation error, we can just type the message as we want, and we can say percentage, we can put it capitalized, percentage should be 100%, but you have, and now we will just say some percent, right? Now, the second value, you really don't care, because it's you just passing the value. For the moment, we really don't care. And then the last value we care about, which is the field. For us, the field is donations. So we can just say donations over here, right? I can just format this code, and over here, we already know that it will be true. So we don't need to do that validation, because otherwise we are here, right? So if we now go into our code and we refresh our browser, we can just come over here and say the following, Bruno 99, for example, and you immediately get this. Percentage should be 100%, but you have 99%. If I just type, for example, 995, for example, it then fails on this validation, right? If I say 95 and I add another donation for example, Bruno, and I say another 95, then it says percentage should be 100, but you have 190. So we just need to say, okay, so a donation for this one is 5%. I can accept the terms and conditions. I can come over here, say the full name is Bruno. I want to donate, for example, £5,000. Oops, this is the validation that I said is a bit silly, because we have now more than 10 characters. So I will just say that my name is only Bruno, right? I'm donating £5,000. Then for the first institution is, for example, the Red Cross, which is helping people around the world. And I can give, for example, some to the police, some people can give to the church, any other institution that you want to help, right? And now that we have this, we can just do a submit. We have everything like that. The only thing I will do now is, if you saw, this add donation and these delete buttons are still active. That's usually not a good thing. I can foresee some problems coming from there, right? It happened to me in the past. That's why I'm a bit burned by that. So let's just go, let's just go over here to our buttons, right? And this is the remove one. So I will do disable equals to is submitting, right? Is submitting. And I will do the exact same thing for the other button that we have in our page. And that other button is to add a donation. So I will just come over here. And now, yes, we should have everything we want for this video. I will refresh. I will just start this from the top and I will put 0 because this is how people will see it. I was just zooming for people on my mobile phones. So I can say 5,000. I can say the institution is the Red Cross once again. Basically, I can say 90%. I can do cancer research, for example. I can say, oops, it's too big. Our silly validations, right? So I can just say that one will be 5%, and then I can add another one, for example, for the police, which is 5%. I can try to submit. Nothing will happen because I have these over here that I need to accept. And then, yes, I can just come over here and submit our form. As you can see, now we don't have any errors. If for some reason you want to disable this submit while you have errors in the form, which some people like to do, I usually don't like to do it, but if you want to do it, I can show you how you can do that. You can just go to the Formik component at the top where we are grabbing the values. Oops, I already went a bit too much. Where we are grabbing the values, the error they submitting, we have something that is called is valid. Okay, so what we are going to do is the form will be disabled if we are submitting or if it's not valid. So I don't think they have an is invalid. No, they just have a is valid. So we just need to negate that one. So we come at the bottom and we will just do the following. If, oops, where is that? It's over here. If it's not valid or we are submitting, then that button is disabled, right? I usually like that button to be enabled for the single reason that people can click there and then it will show all the validation errors. So when I'm going to commit, I will delete that line, okay? So by default, it will be enabled, the button. So I can now click over here. I can say institution Bruno, for example, 100%. I will donate £500 and it will be the person Bruno. So now, if this is not valid, as you can see, this button, you can't submit, right? And then if I do Bruno, then yes, you can submit, right? So I think we have everything you might want for this video. If you have any question or any suggestion, also leave it in the comments down below. If you are not subscribed to the channel yet and you want to subscribe, please do it. Like the video if you like it, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye!